Hello, everyone, and welcome to our time together. I am Jackie Woodside here interviewing the really impeccable professional of Ed Evarts, celebrating, I have my props, the publishing of his latest book. This is second or third book, Ed?
This is my second book.
Your second book, Drive Your Career, 9 High-Impact Ways to Take Responsibility for Your Own Success. What a great topic, talking about taking responsibility for yourself. So again, my name is Jackie Woodside. I am an author, a leadership expert, an executive coach, an occasional keynote speaker. I know Ed professionally. We've been colleagues and friends for many years, and I've followed his career with great interest because he is someone that if you're committed to professional success, Ed Evarts is someone that you want to follow and emulate. His depth of wisdom, his passion, his commitment to helping professionals be all that they can be and drive a great career is really extraordinary. So he's someone who I have enjoyed following and getting to know and just celebrating life with over all these years. So Ed, big congratulations on the publishing of your book. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Is it okay if I go ahead and dive in?
Let's go.
All right, let's do this. First question, I always like to ask people, what's your passion that had you write this book, Drive Your Career, 9 High-Impact Ways to Take Responsibility for Your Own Success? What's the passion that drove this topic for you?
When we met many years ago, Jackie, I think it was 2008 or 2009.
You have a better memory than me.
It was, there was this focus in the training school we were at to talk about your niche, what it is that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I always felt they were like pre-niching, like it was too early to know exactly what you wanted to do or needed to do. And over time, as my coaching career unfolded, it became clear to me what the answer was. And so the answer for me became that I wanted to help people build their self-awareness so they could self-manage more effectively. And so this book really came from 12 years of working with business leaders of all levels, of all organizations, in respect to helping them build their self-awareness on how others might be experiencing them so they could self-manage more effectively. And my first book, Raise Your Visibility and Value, really came from 25 years of corporate work.
Yep.
And Drive Your Career really came from my 12 years as a leadership coach.
Yeah. I love in your book where you say the answer to the question of who knows you best is always you. And I have to say, when I read that, I was a little bit like, dude, I've been around human beings for a long time. I'm not so sure that's my experience of it, right? And then you go on in the book to talk about the importance of self-awareness. So why don't you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I do believe that the person who knows you better than anyone else is yourself. Now, you might have blind spots, and those are things that you don't know that you do that have an impact on others. And of course, that's where self-awareness can be extremely helpful. But, in respect to knowing what you like, what you don't like, any fibs that you've told throughout your life, all those types of things that you've experienced, nobody knows them better than you. And ironically, in our fast-paced corporate lives, we don't spend enough time reflecting on ourselves and closing the door and looking at a whiteboard or looking at a sheet of paper and saying, who do I want to be and how do I want to be seen and what do I want my reputation to be like? And so I do devote a chapter in the book about ensuring that you take thinking time, right, which is time to self-reflect on you, so that you can ensure whomever others are seeing and experiencing are who you want them to see and experience.
Yeah, it's so great. One of the things in my work that I talk to professionals a lot about is knowing your core values and then bringing that into alignment with it. So, when you say this, reflect, do some reflective work, I think one of the ways that people avoid that, or one of the reasons people avoid that, Ed, is because they kind of don't know what to do, right? So self-reflective work, and it's kind of like a 1970s navel gazing, and we don't want to be navel gazers, where we're all over here like finding myself, right? So I know you don't mean that. So can you get a little more concrete? For me, I talk to people a lot about their values. You just said things like the person that you want to be. So give people a little direction when you say spend some time in self-reflection, close that door. I'm imagining that a lot of people honestly just don't prioritize that as being important. But secondly, if they were to do it, would be sitting there a little bit like, okay, close the door, So what's your advice about that?
Well, your observation, I think, is dead on, Jackie, in that this is a very personal exercise.
Yeah,
So there's no junior high or high school class that sits you
right.
down and says, okay, identify your 5 core values that you're going to demonstrate now throughout the rest of your life,
Right.
right?
And how to demonstrate them.
And how to demonstrate them, because there's a big difference between ideas and action. And
Yeah,
so you can find millions of ideas on how to represent yourself effectively in the world. Bringing them to action, quite frankly, is where coaching comes in, but that's where you really figure out how to demonstrate them so that people know that those are your 5 core values. So, I don't know that there's a magic formula for how to do it. Certainly, I'm a big fan of accountability partners. So finding
yeah,
a friend or a colleague whom you can say, hey, I wanted to do some self-reflection. I really wanted to identify the 3 to 5 things that I want to be best known for.
yep,
And can you help me, right? And by having someone help you, your likelihood for success is significantly greater than if
yeah,
you're doing it on your own. If you're doing it on your own, of course, you're going to potentially procrastinate or get distracted, and
yeah.
months will
Other
go
things.
by and you'll say, yeah, I wish I had done that. So,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think finding an accountability partner is a great way to start.
That is a great way to start. Doing some writing, having a buddy that you answer some questions with. I talk about what high consciousness attribute do you want to demonstrate this week, and so I would do this with a mastermind group, and everybody takes on kind of a high vibe principle that they're going to live into in every moment, in every situation. And that's a great way of people bringing their values into alignment with how they're actually behaving.
And what you're essentially doing is you're creating an environment of accountability with these people and quote unquote
Absolutely.
accountability partners,
Yeah.
because now they have others who expect to see something. And of
Yes.
course, if there's a future meeting coming up, I'm not going to show up and say, well, I didn't do anything. I ignored the whole exercise.
Right. Right.
You're going to want to show up, even if it's the night before, to
Right.
say, hey, here's what I did. Here's how I demonstrated the value that I shared with you all. And, quite frankly, this is something of, what I call a hamster wheel, which is once you're on it, it works, right? That you start going and saying, hey, I picked a value I wanted to demonstrate. I could actually demonstrate it in a couple of ways and it feels good, right? So, hey, what's the next value I can demonstrate? And,
Yeah.
how do I want to demonstrate that as well?
That's great. I love that. Yeah, I actually call them their personal accountability team, or their
Right.
personal accountability team. I've been a consultant for a long time, and I have to say 90% of what I get called in for is relationship issues. People not being able to get along, people not being able to manage conflict, people not knowing how to give feedback in a way that it's received so that it lifts people up, that people can actually hear it and use it. So a couple things around that topic I want to get into with you, because you wrote about it in this book. First of all, relationships. And you write a lot in this book about your relationship with your boss, which is huge for people who are in a workplace. Man, it's almost like if you don't get along with your boss, it's like you're in a bad marriage, right?
Right.
And so tell me, you're thinking about that. Why is it so important, and what are some strategies? Maybe some people who don't have a good relationship with their boss, what should they be doing to improve that?
Well, I did not put the 9 behaviors in any type of order of importance, but I will tell you that I started with have a positive relationship with your boss, because I found that to be the most dominant activity that most of my clients thought about. So I'm not a statistician, so I haven't kept sophisticated quantifiable stats on the following, but I would tell you that 80 to 85% of my clients over the last 12 years wish they had a better relationship with their boss. And I'm not saying they want to be best friends and go out for margaritas on Friday night, but they wish they had a better relationship with their boss.
Yeah.
I have a client I'm working with right now who has a very negative relationship with their boss to the point that they're leaving. So this is the impact that a relationship with a boss can have. It's not about, again, being their best friend, but making sure that you understand and are making an effort to have a positive relationship with your boss. Some bosses are hard to have positive relationships with. I'm not suggesting there's a magic formula.
Yeah.
That saves every relationship, but some bosses are very hard to do. So there's a few things you can do in order to kind of improve the likelihood that you would have a good relationship. One is to self-identify with your boss and say, hey, I'd love to improve our relationship. I think it could be a little bit better. What's 1 or 2 things I could be doing differently in order to achieve that? And the
Love that.
hope is the boss would say, thank you for that question. Here's a couple of things I think you can do. And what about me? What's one or two things I could do a little bit differently? So it creates a conversation about improving the relationship from a business perspective that may not have existed previously. The
Yeah,
second thing you can do, the second thing you can do is be very aware of what your boss's goals and objectives are. You know, we're very self-oriented at work in respect to what we want to achieve and where we want to go and what we want to do. And we spend very little time with others saying, hey, what's important to you? Where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? And most importantly, Jackie, you know, how can I help you get there? You know, bosses love to have people who,
especially your boss, right?
Right, especially your boss. They love to have people who support them in the work environment. And I mean, honestly and respectfully support them, but that they know are on the same page and are moving in the right direction. You don't know that unless you know what their goals and objectives are.
That's fantastic. Yeah, developing a good relationship with your colleagues and your boss. You know, I say a lot in the consulting that I do that you spend more time with your colleagues than you do with your family and friends. You know?
You do.
And having good work relationships really enhances and impacts the quality of your life. Vice versa, having, you know, stressful, strained, difficult work relationships also impacts the quality of your life. So I think those are just some really, really important tips. I love that notion of just like, hey, you know, I'm noticing you and I could probably work in our relationship a little bit more. Or, you know, tell me what you're up to this year and how can I support you? I mean, you imagine a boss would be blown away to have somebody come in and ask that question.
Absolutely. This is not a conversation that's happening in organizations around the globe. And if I was a boss and someone was to come in and say, hey, I wanted to talk about you for a little bit, boss, and I'm curious about what your goals and objectives are and how you feel that you're doing, I'm sure they wouldn't know what to say, right? Because it has not happened in the past. And, you know, in workshops that I lead, I oftentimes ask people, you know, raise your hand if you think your relationship with your boss could be better. And of course, the vast majority of people raise their hand. Not that it's a bad relationship. Some could be, but, you know, it could be better. And the reason for that, Jackie, is because we've spent very little time working on it.
Right.
And suddenly it's like, oh, right, I've got to work on having a better relationship with my boss. I need to do something about it.
And no time paying attention to your marriage, chances are it's going to suffer. So I mean, I don't mean to keep making that analogy, but again, you spend more time with your colleagues, most likely, than you do with your family and friends. So super, super important to pay attention to, which leads me to another thing you said in the book that's so fascinating. So these questions to your boss, right? How can we have a better relationship? How can I support you better? What are you up to? What are your goals? Leads to showing up as a person who's curious rather than a person who already knows. And I love that, that you wrote about that in your book, because I think showing up with beginner's mind is such an important professional skill. And unfortunately, in the workplace, we've placed a lot of value in like knowing, I know. And I think that's detrimental to relationships. It's detrimental to growth. So you wrote about this, about curiosity. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, this is, you know, to your point, kind of a way that we've been raised.
Right.
In high school and college, when the teacher asked a question, they expected everyone would know the answer, right? And it was not okay if you said, hey, I don't know. Or, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about that? So, you know, we need to really kind of reinvent ourselves and think about, you know, how can I be first a better listener? So you have to really listen to other people and what they're saying, and more importantly, how they're saying it.
Yeah.
And then generate curiosity around how they are exploring the world or thinking through that particular topic. One of my favorite quotes comes from Stephen Covey, his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And habit number 5 is seek first to understand and then to be understood, right? So you first want to understand the other person, why they think what they think, where they're coming from, you know, how passionate are they about this particular topic, before you weigh in and start sharing with them what you think. But unfortunately, what happens in most organizations is I believe the first thing I have to do is tell people everything I know and overwhelm them with my knowledge and intelligence and sophistication. And by the way, if you then get a chance to share your thoughts, that would be great. So we've got to flip that model and demonstrate greater curiosity. In the book, I tell the story of a client who was always the first to answer, because they had kind of a preference for extroversion. So if a workshop facilitator or a colleague said,
Yeah.
what do you think? Or, what's your next step, et cetera, this person would always raise their hand and answer. And they began to notice after a while that they were not giving great answers because they hadn't heard everyone else's yet. And by the time everyone else gave an answer, they're like, oh, my first answer sounds stupid, right? I can't believe I said what I said. So by first seeking to understand and not being the first to go and being more curious about what people are saying, your likelihood of contributing more effectively is greater.
It's great.
Yeah, you don't have to be the first. You want to ensure that what you're contributing is valuable. And that's whether it's first or middle or last, as long as it's valuable, it's going to add value to your relationships and to your organization.
And that's what we want to do, right? So it's talking about extroversion and the person who kind of has difficulty self-managing, didn't take their Adderall dose that morning or something, I don't know. But you also talk in your book about playing the hand that you've been dealt. I'm actually a raging introvert, which could be perceived as a occupational hazard, given that my work is very public. Which now, have you heard there's a new thing called ambivert?
I have heard of ambivert.
Yeah. So I'm a classic ambivert. I love being on when I'm in my role, and otherwise pretty much don't talk to me. Thanks for an interesting marriage. But so I've had to play the hand that I'm dealt, right? When I first thought I was just an introvert, it's like, oh, well, I can't do this work. But I kept pursuing, kept being curious about it, because I do like being in front of the room, training, leading, speaking. So speak to that a little bit. Play the hand that you've been dealt. How does that help your career?
Yeah, this became a pattern with a number of clients, because I found as I was speaking to clients about their current situation, they were stuck in the past. And you can't solve the future if you're stuck in the past. The past is interesting. The past may direct the future in some regards, but if you're stuck in the past, you'll never be able to move on. So as a secret personal confession, I have been playing in a poker game. So this is a real story. I've been playing in a poker game for 22 years that I started back in January of 1998. If you had told me in January of 1998, I'd still be playing poker 22 years later, I would have laughed and said, no way. But today we play virtually, so we play online, and we're anxious to get back to being in person. But, it just struck me that this being stuck in the past was very much like a poker game, because in a poker game, you get dealt a hand, and you can't pick the hand you've been dealt, right? This is the hand you've been dealt. And you really have three choices when you're dealt a hand. You can either bluff, and I think bluffing is valuable for like a couple of days, but it is not a good long-term strategy.
Yep.
You can fold, which means you decide that this was not a good hand. And in some cases, it's not a good workplace. And so the best decision is just to move on to another workplace that can honor and value me as a contributor. Or you can take action. And so, in coaching, the goal is really to help people take action. So, people who are stuck in the past, have been dealt a hand, but what they need to do is figure out how to play it.
Yeah.
And so you've got to play the hand you've been dealt. So when people tell me their story and I ask, tell me a little bit about work, whatever, I'll say, okay, so that's the hand you've been dealt. You don't have a great relationship with your boss. You have a couple of subordinates who are underperforming. The business is a little bit rocky. What are you going to do about it?
Exactly right.
And now they're like, oh, I hadn't thought about that, right? I've been so stuck talking about what I'm experiencing. I haven't spent any time thinking about how to move forward. So that's where that chapter comes from, which is you've got to play the hand you've been dealt. You have to say, this is the hand I've been dealt. It's not a good hand. I mean, I will tell you in poker, you're not always dealt good hands.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to fold. Sometimes you'll bluff a little bit to see if you can get by, but you have to take action to have progress.
Yeah, it's such a great coaching question, right? Not why is this happening to me, but what am I going to do about it? Or not why am I this way, but given that this is the circumstance, how am I going to handle it? What am I going to do? Action oriented.
Yeah, you've got to be future focused. So in most of the work that I do and in the ways that I approach relationships with people, it's again giving them space to talk about what they've experienced, because sometimes we want to talk about it and it can even be cathartic just to get it out. But then quickly shift to, okay, thank you for sharing with me that experience. What's the next step for you? What are you going to do about it? Oftentimes they need to think about it a little bit to say, gee, I don't know. I hadn't thought about that.
Make a strategy.
Come up with some strategies and ideas. And again, this is where coaching can come in. And, but it really came from this connection, I think, between what my clients were telling me and my own personal experience playing poker, and
Yeah,
realizing
that's
that,
so great.
you know, you are always going to be dealt a hand. And also, by the way, just quickly, you know, a lot of people will say that the hand they're dealt when they're recruited is different than the hand they were dealt when they started. And I have another client who works at a public organization who currently has a incredibly complex situation at work. And I said, what did they tell you about this when they interviewed you? Oh, they didn't tell me about this at all. I
Yeah.
said, this is a huge issue. And no time during the interview process did somebody say, oh, by the way, when you join, here's what you will experience. The person didn't ask either. And so no one brought it up. And then the person joins the organization and now, of course, has an incredibly difficult thing. So the hand you've been dealt may change,
Right?
but
From what you
now,
expect.
right, but now we know the hand that she's been dealt, and it's not a good hand. And now she's got to figure out, and that's why we're working together,
Yeah.
what steps she can take in order to improve it.
So this kind of comes full circle, right, Ed? Because when you talk about like you can either bluff or you can take action or you can leave, you know, I totally agree with that. And if someone is, you know, so the dealt a bad hand, it's not a good relationship, I think I'm going to move on. And then I'm in this new place and I've been dealt a bad hand and it's not a good relationship, right? So sometimes the common denominator here is you.
Yes.
Right? You have to deal with that. So this is kind of coming full circle. Deal with the hand you've been dealt with and practice self-awareness, because maybe it's, you know, not a good hand, maybe not so much because of what's going on out there, but because of who you're being and what you're bringing to the circumstance. So I really like the way that all of these tips that you've put into the book really support one another, because that kind of, you know, self-awareness and curiosity about, gee, what is the problem here?
Right.
Is it them? Is it me? Or is it something in between? And most often, of course, it's something in between.
Well, you're dead on, Jackie. And this is one of the reasons you and I stay connected, because I currently have a client, and this is the client I mentioned a short while ago, who is leaving a company because of the relationship my client has with the boss.
Yep.
I met this client at this client's prior company, and my client left that organization because of the relationship my client had with the boss. So,
Right.
you know,
So
the
how do
first
you
thing,
help people discern that, Ed? Let's talk, because somehow I'll bet this is not an uncommon issue.
well, it may
Right?
not be uncommon, but it's also very uncomfortable, because
Very
to ask the
uncomfortable.
question, hey, what's the common denominator here? Could it be you? They
Right?
might say, well, wait a minute, you know, that you're supposed to be helping me and you're fired, right? You can't make me the issue. It's a lot about, and this goes back to the work that I do, self-awareness,
Yeah.
which is, you know, is there something, and I like the way that you phrased it, Jackie, you know, is there something you do or some ways that you start? You know, you might not be starting well, right? So people in their first 90 days come in thinking they have to change the world.
Yep.
And in reality, what you want to do is listen and be curious and, you know, think about what's going on, so that when you do make changes, they are better grounded in
Yeah.
respect to the organization versus you just doing what you think is right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really opening their eyes to, you know, what's the possibility that the common factor might be, you know, not you, but something you do that you don't maybe even realize that you're doing that could be having a negative influence. So if you're starting at a new company and coming in thinking you have to change the world, and that alienates people, it may be hard to bring them back. And once they're alienated, now, you know, you might as well leave, because you are going to have a very hard time building a relationship with them.
Right. Right. I say it takes a whole career to create a great reputation and a nanosecond to ruin it.
That's right. It does.
It's so true. You know, you talk about this in your book, about, speaking of ruining your reputation, or maybe the problem is over here. You talk about the power of the pause. How does that play into what we're talking about here?
Yeah, I'll tell you, the power of the pause is one of my favorite pieces of advice, because I see this so often in the higher levels of the organization. So presidents, senior vice presidents, vice presidents. And what's happening, Jackie, is we kind of operate in an inverted pyramid, where we believe that the higher you are in the organization, the more you know. You know, if you're the president, you know everything and can do everything, and everything you do is right. In reality, that may not be the case. And in fact, sometimes it could be extremely not the case, right? So oftentimes these people, in an effort to stay ahead of competition, don't pause, and they just go, 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 go. And they email 24 hours a day, and they think about their business 24 hours a day. And they don't stop to realize that while this is important to them, it may not be as important to others. And while the business is important to them, it's not something I'm going to be doing at 2 a.m. in the morning. It's not something I'm going to be doing on the weekend, right? So it's really bringing to the attention of these leaders the importance of pausing. Now, pausing is not slowing down. So I don't want people to worry that I'm saying, oh no, take your time and go slowly. Pausing is ensuring that when you're starting, that you have everything lined up as it should be, to prevent figuring it out later and delaying delivery, right? So oftentimes, and this has been my own experience as well, we move so quickly in organization, let's go, and we start doing stuff. And then 2 or 3 months down the road, we realize we forgot something, or something is not going the way that we thought it would. And now we're delayed, right, in delivering the project. And, I don't know the exact percentage, but I think it's a very high percentage of projects that end up being late. I think it's something like 85% of projects are late or incomplete because of timing.
85%, that's really high.
Yeah. Again, don't quote me, but I think it's a very, very high number. So part of that reason is just because we didn't pause enough early on to ensure all of our ducks were in a row before we kicked off and started to work. And now we're finding later that things weren't what we thought they were, or people aren't able to keep up, and now we're delayed in moving forward. So pausing is such an effective leadership skill. Again, it's not slowing down. It could be something as simple as, hey, everybody, we had a great meeting. It sounds like we've got some key deliverables. I'd like everyone just to think about it tonight, and then tomorrow, send me an email and let me know if you still think that we're ready to move forward. And it just gives people even a day to just think about it and say, okay, are we ready? Can we do everything? Let me call Jackie and make sure she can do that. Yep, we're ready to go, right? Yeah. I mean, that alone is a very effective tool. Unfortunately, what happens in organizations is we say, okay, everybody, that was a great meeting. Everybody's got their to-dos, go.
Let's go, right.
And, I might be sitting there saying, oh my God, I can't do this, right? But I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to slow the project down, right?
Right. I think it's also important at the interpersonal interface of remembering to pause, because, sometimes people disagree, sometimes things get heated. I don't see it the way you see it. And that ability to just step back emotionally, step back with my responses, give a moment. So pausing, slowing down, paying attention, being mindful, such a big difference in the workplace.
Yeah. And, you just mentioned something that's important, Jackie, which is what I call short-term reminders. So oftentimes what we talk about is behavior modification, which is very hard to do. So, it's like not biting your nails. For people who bite their nails, they don't realize they're doing it until their finger's in their mouth. And it's too late, right? You're not going to stop biting your nails if you can't stop putting your finger in your mouth. So, what I encourage clients to do is create what I call short-term reminders, which could be something as easy as like a little colored dot. And so if your goal is to pause more and not be go, 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 put a little yellow dot on your laptop, put it on your binder that you carry, maybe on the back of your phone, put it on your rear view mirror of your car. If it's also at home, you're getting this feedback. And in the short term, you don't do this permanently, but short term reminds you to do this. If you don't have a reminder system of something you're trying to modify, it will just each day it gets less important, less important, less important. And your likelihood of making changes is significant.
Right. And neurologically, you're really swimming upstream, because neurologically our brain is programmed to just keep doing the same thing so that it conserves energy. You don't have to think as much. So we operate by default.
Right.
And have difficulty really self-reflecting and being able to alter those kind of habitual behaviors. So I get it. I tell my clients to set an alarm for every hour of the day for the next, or of the workday, for the next week. And when that reminder goes off, that's your cue. Oh, wait, am I being present? Oh, wait, am I pausing? Am I, right? So I like the yellow dot though. I may borrow that.
Well, it's, you can buy them at Staples.
Yeah, right, there you go. Well, and coaches love structures, right? Change doesn't happen in a vacuum. You've got to have, whether it's a reminder on your phone or sometimes I'll have people use a screensaver. If there's a model that I'm working with, I'll have them put it on their screensaver. But you've got to have that kind of structure. When we talk about pausing and the interpersonal exchanges, one of the places in the workplace where I know I, as a consultant, I'm sure the same for you, what I come up against most often is that people just don't know how to give feedback in a way that makes a difference. I say by the time that I get called in most often to work with an employee or to provide executive coaching, by the time I get called in, it's almost like family therapy or marriage counseling. It's a little too late. I was a therapist, as you know, Ed, for many, many years. And by the time people end up in my office for marriage counseling, it's like, dudes, you should have been here 2 years ago. I could have helped. You hate each other. What do you want me to do?
That's
right?
right. That's right.
So I feel the same in organizations a lot of times but when people call in the coach, or it's like, I think you should see a coach. It's like, saying they need to go see a shrink these days. But what's the issue with being able to give constructive feedback? Why is that such a thing in the workplace? And why, let's just say this, why are people so bad at it?
Well, three things come to mind when you ask those questions, Jackie. The first is, when we look back at our upbringing, junior high school, college, we never were in programs that shared how to give feedback, right? Something as basic as, hey, somebody's doing something that you think is not reflecting well on them. How do you tell them? And we don't know. I mean, we really don't know. And people will sit there and say, I don't have any idea how to tell Jackie this. And I value our relationship, so I'm not going to say anything, that type of thing. So, we've really not been raised culturally to provide feedback, even if it's helpful, which of course is shocking that we don't even know how to give people, helpful feedback. When I began working with clients, because of this mentality, there were a couple of questions I would ask, and I would always get one of two answers. So I would say, hey, can you send me your last performance appraisal? I'd like to hear how your boss thought about you. And they would say one of two things. Either one, they'd laugh and say, performance appraisal? Really?
I don't have one.
I don't have one. I've never gotten one. And I'd be like, so in the 5 years you've been at this company, you have never gotten, I'll write something and they'll have me write it and my boss will sign it. I mean, there's just horrible, horrible structures out there. And this comes as well from my 25 years in corporate America, where my focus was human resources as a way to provide business value. And performance reviews were just something that nobody liked to do. Nobody was.
That's your next book, Ed. That should be your next book. How to do, there are a number of performance. Valuable performance evaluations. I can see it already. I can see the cover.
Yeah, well, there's a number of books out there already on modifying the performance review process and how to make it more conversational. But so the structure was terrible. Or they would say, oh, I've got a performance review. Great, can you send it to me? And it would all be filled with positive feedback. And I would get back to the person and say, hey, fantastic performance review, congratulations. What did your boss tell you you could do differently to be more effective? Oh, nothing. So they either had no feedback, or the feedback that they got was all positive. I mean, rarely, Jackie, did I have someone come back to me to say, hey, here's the feedback that I got that's positive. And here are 2 or 3 things that my boss thought I could do a little bit differently to be more effective. I could probably fit it on one hand the number of times that has happened. So when I was in corporate America, anytime that we did self-assessments, I tried to get into that habit of, if it was all positive, I'd get back and say, hey, Jackie, thank you so much for delivering me this information. Fantastic overview of your last year. Can you tell me a little bit more about things that you're working on that aren't going well, or things that you're disappointed in, or things that you want to work on? Give me a little bit more of the, what are we doing, right? Because it's not meant to be a beauty contest where you say, look how fantastic I am.
Right.
So those behaviors exist in organizations today. I'd love to say that we're way past that behavior. There are certainly some companies that are a little bit cutting edge, as you were mentioning. My next book could be about performance reviews. It won't be, but it could be about how to have these conversations and how to ensure that we are providing people feedback. This is such a miss in organizations, because for me, if you reported to me, and if 2 or 3 times a year I sat down and said, hey, Jackie, here is what I'm observing that you're doing really well. How is it that you're doing this? Let's keep it up. How can you do more of it? And here are 2 or 3 things that I think you could do differently to be more effective. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's how, and again, being future focused, here's how you could do it a little bit differently. It's an incredibly valuable conversation. It helps build engagement. It helps people feel that they're evolving. But for whatever reason, we just don't have it as part of our culture. People don't talk about it. People don't do it. And we end up either with no performance review, or a performance review that's all positive with no constructive feedback.
It does nothing. I tell my managers, if you are not growing your people, you're not doing your job.
Right.
And growing your people means, setting stretch goals, identifying areas where they're not performing optimally, and being able to help them reach and stretch and grow. That's really, I mean, if you will, that's the job of the workplace. Was it Freud that said that adult work is the same as children's play? And children use play to learn and to grow. And that's what we're still doing as adults when it's done well. And one of the skills that I think is critically important when you're giving feedback is this notion of empathy, really being able to get over there where the other person is at. What are they feeling? What's that like for them? What's the stress and the pace of this place? How is the culture impacting you? Having that kind of empathy is so critical. And yet, it comes with a mixed bag, right? If particularly, I think for men, if men are too empathic, are they weak? And if women are too empathic, are they soft and emotional? So, and yet it's a key human quality and relational quality that helps improve relationships overall. That's been proven scientifically. So what's your take on that, and how do you address that in the book?
Well, I do have a chapter specifically talking about how to build your empathetic skills. I will tell you, I believe the word empathy is going to be the word of this decade. Words like vulnerability, humility, empathy are growing in respect to the impact it can have on a business's behavior. And so it's amazing, right, that so few people know how to demonstrate empathy or even think about it as part of leadership for the reasons you just mentioned. They see it as a weakness, right? That if I show that I care about you, I must be weak, right? I can't care about you in the workplace. So, empathy is all about really putting you where somebody else is, right? So if you and I are talking about something, I have no information about it, and I bump into you Monday morning and you're not your usual bubbly, happy self. Somebody with low empathy would say, "Hey, Jackie, how's it going? All right, see you later," and not even notice, right, that Jackie's not having a great day. A person with empathy or demonstrating empathetic skills would say, "Hey, you don't seem yourself today. What's going on?" Right? So I'm bringing myself to where you are to help you. I don't even have to agree with what it is that is impacting you personally, right? I might not have the same emotional impact that it has for you, but I need to ensure that you understand that I'm curious about what's happening.
Yep.
I'm happy to help if I can. I'm going to listen. I might even ask a few questions. Maybe we need to do something like, it sounds like you're not doing really well on this topic. Why don't you take today off?
Nice.
Why don't you take the day off, and we won't even count it against your sick time, and just clear your head a little bit, right? I mean, those
Why
are
is
things.
this important in the workplace? Why do you see as empathy being one of the things that drives your career?
So it's important for one key word, which is engagement. For people, when you think about people holistically, I don't magically leave my home and leave my personal life at the door and now become this business machine. And then when I come home at night, get rid of the business machine and I'm now a person. If I'm having a bad day at home, if I just had a fight with my daughter or with my spouse and it's troubling me, it's going to impact me in the workplace. So for purposes, Jackie, of engagement, I need to ensure that if I'm having a bad day, which by the way, I don't want to have many of, I don't want to come to work every day saying, "Oh, I had a bad day, I had a bad day." But, every once in a while, I'm going to have a bad day. And I want to know that my company and my boss is going to demonstrate empathy and give me the room and space that I need in order to get through it. And that's the goal. So the goal, again, is to be future focused.
Yep.
And by recognizing through empathy that you're having a bad day, or something that you have said or done is impacting you negatively, that we have room to deal with it and we can help you clear it out so that you can move forward.
So great. I tell my clients, you don't have a work life and a personal life. You have one life that you've been given, some of which you get paid for, some of which you do not. But your work life impacts what's happening after work and at home, and your home life is certainly going to impact how you show up at work. So I like that holistic, use the word holistic, really just honoring and appreciating the whole being, the whole person that's showing up at your workplace.
Well, I read an article that hates the phrase work-life balance.
Yeah.
I mean,
I wrote an article on that, actually. I call it whole life integration.
Right. They called it life balance because work is a part of life.
Right. Exactly.
It's not like it's separate.
Yeah, right? Exactly. So right. That's great.
You got to figure out. And again, people don't want to bring their personal life. And for some people, it's uncomfortable. They prefer not to talk about what's happening at home, and it might be affecting them in some way, and that's okay as well. But it's really recognizing that work is part of life, and using the phrase that you just used, how do I operate in that environment effectively?
Yeah, in an integrated fashion. It's great. So we've covered a lot of territory, Ed, as you look at what we've covered and what's in your book. Is there anything that I've missed that you want to put out there? We're at about 40 minutes here. I want to wrap up around 45 minutes. So anything that I've missed or that we haven't covered that you feel you just want to put that in there, or any last thoughts that you want to leave your listener with about how to really engage their career and move it forward?
Well, I'd leave maybe with a couple of tips. So for people who are watching the video, Jackie, one is asking yourself, how is my relationship with my boss? And if I do believe it could be better, what am I going to do about it? You have to own it, right? So I always believe as well that your boss doesn't own having good relationships with you, that you own having a good relationship with your boss, just like your boss owns having a good relationship with his or her boss, right? So, you want to ensure that you are opening that relationship and making it as positive as possible. Again, you don't have to be best friends. You may be very different in how you operate in life, but you want to ensure that they have a very, positive relationship on that front. And then secondly, maybe, when we think back on play the hand you've been dealt, taking some time to think about the hand you've been dealt. And also, what am I now going to do about it? Because some of the listeners here today may not have good hands and need to really think about it a little bit in order to make good progress. So I think you have a copy of my book. I've got a copy of my book, Drive Your Career. So
love it. Look at this. We have matching books. I love that.
We do. So it's available on Amazon. It's available in audio. Tricia Griffin-Carty did the audio version.
Nice.
It's available in Kindle. So for all types of reading capabilities, you can
and I'll also say, Ed, it was really easy to read, and it doesn't go on and on and on. It kind of makes the point, right? And it gives you good examples, and then you move on to the next point. It's a quick, easy read, and so just packed with really great information. So I mean, I definitely will be referring it to clients of mine and people who are really looking to take their career to the next level. This is absolutely a great resource for it. So thank you for your wisdom, for the ways that you just tirelessly put it out there to your clients and to make a difference for people. It's just so great to be your colleague and your friend, and glad we had the chance to do this together.
Well, thank you, Jackie, for offering to host the conversation today. It was great catching up with you, and I hope we shared some good ideas and objectives with people who are participating. So thank you again for hosting.
All right. Thanks so much, Ed, and good luck with your book.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone. Take care.